We welcome you to meeting number 21 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. The committee is meeting in public today to receive two separate briefings, so there will be two one-hour panels. The first with a representative from the Privy Council office and the Secretary of the Treasury Board. Unfortunately, the Clerk of the Privy Council is unable to be with us due to illness, and I'm sure all members join me in wishing him a speedy recovery. The second briefing is from the Deputy Minister of Finance. Members will have noticed that I have asked to extend our meeting today by 30 minutes, so we can go in camera for some very timely committee business. I hope you can all stay for that extra time. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021, and therefore members may be attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. And I'm sure you can tell by now that I am in the room. For those participating virtually, interpretation services are available for this meeting. As you know, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. When you are done speaking, please put your mic on mute to minimize any interference. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. Unless there are exceptional circumstances, the use of headsets with a boom microphone is mandatory for everyone participating remotely. And as always, should any technical challenges arise, please advise me. And note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. Joining us from the Privy Council is Janine Sherman, Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet, Senior Personnel and Public Service Renewal. From the Treasury Board Secretariat, Peter Wallace, Secretary of the Treasury Board of Canada, and Roch Huppé, Comptroller General of Canada. Welcome, and I will now turn the floor over to Ms. Sherman. You have 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame Chair. Je tiens à remercier le comité de me donner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to be here today and to speak about the culture of the public service, an issue that is critically important to our effectiveness. When I'm speaking of culture, it's important to emphasize that given the size, the scope, and geographic reach of our public service, we're really speaking about a range of different cultures. There are common values, however, that are shared in the entire organization. So our commitment to offer excellent services to Canadians, also our responsibility to offer the best advice to everyone, and our determination in terms of the continuous improvement and renewal. This committee has called upon the public service in undertaking its operations to examine best practices in respect of transformation and governance. These comparisons and principles can inform key issues such as project management, but they've also helped shape our current approach to public service renewal, named Beyond 2020.
January 2019, and sought to build on the growing spirit of innovation and collaboration across the public service. It's a framework focused on nurturing the mindsets and behaviors within the public service that are necessary to build a more agile, more inclusive, and better equipped institution. Its application is driven by departments, agencies, communities, and individual public servants. Measuring how we are progressing is critical to informing our efforts, both in terms of identifying best practices, as well as highlighting the areas that need greater attention and effort. One important measure is the opinion of our employees. We are seeing strong progress in a number of areas relating to having your voice and ideas heard, being empowered and thinking differently. For example, in the 2019 Public Service Employee Survey, responses indicate that employees have an increasing view that they have opportunities to provide input into decisions that affect their work. They feel encouraged to be innovative or take initiative in their work, and they would be supported by their department or agency if they proposed a new idea. Public service renewal is not an academic exercise that exists outside or alongside the priorities of the day. The contrary is, it is what positions us to quickly adjust and tackle new and emerging priorities. This has been particularly evident in the face of two current challenges for the public service: supporting Canadians through the COVID-19 pandemic and advancing anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion. After the pandemic hit, we heard from public servants that the core aspects of our renewal approach have increased in relevance. In delivering on the government's efforts to support Canadians through the pandemic, we are seeing that the Beyond 2020 themes of being agile, inclusive, and equipped are being lived out in quite extraordinary ways. This is a result in part of having a strong focus on delivering results for Canadians, which in turn has relied on a relentless commitment to service and to finding innovative ways to deliver practical solutions. The role of the public service in supporting the pandemic is still unfolding. It has shown us that the status quo is not always an option. The reality of needing to generate policy, program, and technology responses in near real time over the last year has served to highlight the positive and important role that innovation and agility can play in bringing ideas to light more quickly and adjusting to pace to feedback. It will be important for us to harvest lessons from this experience, to use these findings to help inform our renewal efforts going forward. I believe we will be well served in this work by a defining feature of our enterprise-wide culture, and that is notably a willingness to look closely at where we need to make change and to learn from our experience. Which brings me to the second issue I'd touch on. We need to tackle racism and increase diversity and inclusion in the public service. Communities and networks of diverse public servants have been working to advance equity and inclusion in our organizations. But despite these efforts and ongoing work, we have not made the progress that we need to. This is why on January 22nd, 2021, the clerk released a call to action on anti-racism, equity, and inclusion in the federal public service. The call to action is about setting expectations for leaders at all levels to take concrete steps to create a more representative and inclusive public service. And departments and agencies are already showing a strong commitment to that progress. They're creating anti-racism task forces, advancing a dialogue to better understand and address what is transpiring in the workplace. We have offerings from the Canada School of Public Service on anti-racism alongside other diversity and inclusion offerings. We are continuing to develop disaggregated data to provide a better understanding of the experiences of public servants from diverse backgrounds. It is this data that will help us identify where gaps exist, but we must now act on what the results are telling us. I started by saying I was here to talk about public service culture, and in doing so, I've just outlined a few examples that demonstrate our commitment to renewal with a focus on culture through our own mindsets and behaviors. Public service culture and renewal is a journey. It has a past, we are living its present, and it will evolve in the future, but it is never static. And we will always welcome opportunities to have open conversations about what we have learned and where we need to improve. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sherman. We will now go to Mr. Wallace for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm joined by Occupé, who serves as the Controller General of Canada. I aim to be as brief and direct as I can. This is an important dialogue. I want to start off by emphasizing that Treasury Board Secretariat accepts the Auditor General's Spring 2018 report and Michael Ferguson's personal accompanying commentary. And by accept, I don't mean grudgingly accept the recommendations. I mean we embrace the analysis and have worked fundamentally to understand and implement those incredibly important recommendations to prevent the tragedy of Phoenix from ever occurring again. We take this seriously. We're pleased to report on the progress we've made to date, but we're also pleased to discuss with this committee some of the limitations and some of the work we frankly have left to continue to do. I want to speak to 3 areas of progress and reform, and also acknowledge the limits on those. The first has been at essentially the rule set or the policy level. Treasury Board and the Secretariat have worked hard to improve the policies and directives which guide deputies and other decision makers. We've put in place a wide number of policies. These are policy reforms. These are publicly available. They're on the web. I think they're quite consistent with those in other governments, and they're largely consistent with those that guide large private sector institutions as well. Fundamentally, we've established new lines of accountability around and standards around IT projects, including some gating and peer review that didn't exist before. An enterprise architecture review board, which sounds kind of boring and jargony, but it means that the chief information officer now has direct eyes on business critical projects, reviews prior to investment. We've also put in place a series of other mechanisms, and we're happy to answer detailed questions on those in terms of the IT policies. Roch Kupé, in his role as Controller General, has been instrumental in establishing new standards for project management. So we have senior designated officials and project sponsors for each project, so we actually know who's in charge, which throat to choke, where the primary points of accountability are. We require now concept cases, so we actually know what the projects are about, what they're supposed to be doing, how digital principles can be applied. And we've made sure that we've established competency profiles so that we have some sense of who's in charge of these projects, not only from an accountability perspective, but what their capabilities should be and how we can track that well. We've also, of course, been working and quite busy on the HR side. And since April of 2020, we have a new raft or new set of HR policies in place that effectively increase the flexibilities for deputies to implement their responsibilities with respect to human resources. And in particular, deputies can now retrospectively recover pay and performance pay. That's pay and performance pay that might have been given in error if the deputy understood in future what they. Sorry, I won't bother with the detailed explanation. But effectively, we've given deputies now the power to recover performance pay retroactively, and also to deploy executives where they need them the most. These are flexibilities that were not available before and are significant reforms. It's early days, and frankly, the realities of 2020 and 2021 have impaired our ability to collect data and get an early sense of how these reforms are working. We'll continue to monitor and adjust. These policy changes, I think, are important. They're useful. They're directionally correct. I'm very comfortable with them, but I don't take it for granted that they will have the necessary impact. It is something we need to monitor and be on top of. And in this area, we're completely fundamentally on top of the notion of the Auditor General around form and substance. We're paying a huge amount of attention to the application of these new policies with respect to major new programs in terms of income support, immigration reform, and of course, the next gen of HR to pay systems. These are fundamentally focused on different and more structured methodologies. The early results from these, including the Auditor General's most recent review in February of this year, have shown some real progress, and we're very pleased with that. Last thing I want to talk about is the cultural reform. We remain relentlessly focused on the culture of the public service and essentially ensuring that we now have in place enterprise-wide governance for major programs, including a couple of deputy minister committees that I personally chair. We are importantly putting in place new internal audit resources to make sure that decision makers are able to deal with something that they were unable to get in Phoenix, which is a direct line of sight into the actual independent, verifiable by internal audit understandings of progress against objectives. We are, of course, learning from our experiences in the pandemic, where, as Janine Sherman indicated, we've been able to respond with some considerable agility. I will finish very briefly by saying that we have the policies and processes in place. We do not take progress for granted. We remain relentlessly focused on making sure that we have policies in place, that we have actual lived experience, that we focus in on the results to date, and that we work with the Deputy Minister cadre to ensure a great deal of attention on information technology, learning the lessons of Phoenix, and staying on top of these vital areas. Much appreciated. We genuinely look forward to questions because we think this is an incredibly important dialogue and are pleased to share both our progress and our limitations with this committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now go to our round of questioning. The first round is 6 minutes, and we will start with Mr. Berthold for 6 minutes. You are muted.
Yeah, merci. Je pensais que je m'étais.
Yes, I thought I was. So thank you very much, Madam Chair. You'll allow me to join my voice to yours to wish prompt recovery to the Privy Council clerk. We hope he'll be soon back with us in full health. Thank you very much, Ms. Sherman and Mr. Wallace, for your presentations today. I think that we're waiting for additional answers because if the committee asked to see you, there are some answers. So recommendation 1 concerning accountability of executives, because Mr. Wallace, I heard you say that there are several policies that have been put in place that gives possibility for the Treasury Board to go and recover the performance bonuses, which is very important. So I had something else. I wanted to emphasize the excellent work of the public service. Now, people are responding to citizens' needs with few means at their disposal because things are changing so quickly. So we see that, and so I also wanted to acknowledge that with you today. To come back to the point that interests us today, Ms. Sherman, you spoke a lot about culture. You talked about the new policy to bring in executives to the public service. But what we're trying to know is what is being done to make sure that the upper management is held accountable. So you have a document. Do you have a document since 2019 who shows all the measures that have been put in place to ensure the accountability of the Deputy Minister and the upper executives of the public service, or the higher officials of the public service?
Madam Chair, if I can answer the question in respect of deputy ministers, the accountability regime is essentially the performance management program, which is an established program. It has been in place for some time. It's outlined on our website. It does require a rigorous process of evaluation for deputies in terms of the expected results annually, as well as the achievements that they make. We, as my colleague had mentioned, in terms of performance pay, the significant change that has been made was April 2018, so prior to the 2019 timeframe. But the same in terms of the recovery of performance pay in certain situations. The overall performance management regime does remain the same. I would highlight that there are several sort of elements of that in terms of program and policy results, management results, leadership results, and each year those are, and then there is a corporate commitment that is set each year by the clerk of the Privy Council. We have had over several years since 1718, I believe, a requirement for deputy ministers to focus on some of the Phoenix-related issues in terms of ensuring employees receive pay, that their own systems are working properly, and they are addressing concerns, and that they are contributing to the work of Public Services and Procurement Canada, as well as the Treasury Board Secretariat, in terms of yes.
Je veux pas vous interrompre, Madame Sherman.
I don't want to interrupt you, Ms. Sherman. What I wanted to know is that we had talked about the accountability structure. What does the government do to deal with serious cases of bad management? Does the government have a register for each department of anomalies or serious problems in management? How many cases have there been in the recent years since the deadline that was determined at the presentation of this report in 2018, do we have a number of cases of disciplinary cases? Can you give us a picture of the improvement of accountability of the officials of the public service since then? So how did these improvements that you've mentioned, Mr. Wallace, happen? Did everyone become better all of a sudden and there's no more bad management?
I don't want to give you assurance that there is no more bad management. The policies were put in place on April the 1st of 2020. They extend the ability that deputies already have, and accountability in these instances rests with the deputy heads of the institutions. They extend the capabilities deputies already have to deal with poor performance and make it possible to retroactively catch up with performance pay that may have been given in error, and also provide deputies with better flexibilities in terms of the deployment of their resources. Frankly, it's early days. We do not yet have numbers, secure numbers on how these authorities have been implemented, and it will have been complicated by the realities of the pandemic over the course of the past year. Reforms that allow deputies an ability to have additional tools to drive cultural change in their organizations and to apply accountability. I do wish I was able to give you a number. Unfortunately, just simply the realities of 2020 and early 2021 will obscure the data signal. You'll have to ask me that question in future. I apologize for not being able to give you a clear answer.
Very much, Mr. Berthold and Mr. Wallace. We will now move on to Mr. Fergus for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would also wish to say the same thing as my colleague, Mr. Berthold, in wishing a quick recovery and a quick and full recovery for Mr. Shugart. As a resident of the NCR for the past 30 years, more than 30 years, I've had the opportunity to get to know Mr. Shugart on several occasions. And he is a person who's very dedicated for providing public service, and we wish him a full recovery. I would also like to thank Ms. Sherman and Mr. Wallace for their appearance and evidence today. They spoke about the importance of changing not only policies but culture, and specifically referred to the report of the Auditor General in terms of technological, in terms of IT. So my first question is for Madam Sherman. We know that changing policies and changing culture, both of these are difficult, but changing policy seems to be easier than changing culture. You mentioned the importance of the Privy Council Clerk's initiative, which encouraged deputy ministers to do better in order to fight racism, and especially the anti-Black racism in the public service, to ensure that the richness of Canadian diversity is reflected at all levels of the public service. Could you tell us more about the initiatives that you believe would be necessary to take to make sure that Black Canadians will no longer be subjected to discrimination within the public service?
Thank you very much for the question. It is a, as you have pointed out, it is a focus and a priority that the clerk has put out there for the public service, and we are very taking it very seriously and looking for significant concrete action to be taken at all levels of leadership. But I would highlight as well, in addition to the call to action, which is I think I've mentioned, it is reinforcing the importance of action, of there's a lot of work that has been done, but we haven't made enough progress. So it is actually looking for ways to improve the results that we have, and we're working on that. The deputy ministers have also received in their performance management for the current year a request to take on particular activities. We've given them a list of things that we are expecting them to do around training, awareness, retention, promotion, and leadership development in terms of Black employees in particular, and all different groups of visible minorities and persons with disabilities. So we are expecting people to take significant action. Some of that is training and awareness building, things like unconscious bias training, and then going, even deeper into the organizations to make sure that there is a dialogue so that the voices of public servants are heard. People who have potentially, experienced a very different public service than the ideal that we strive for. There will be an effort to improve recruitment and retention. And I would point out, I think that some of that, we often have very good results on representation at different levels of the public service, and we know we need to do more to ensure that the leadership levels reflect the same diversity and representation. So there are efforts to do both external recruitment, to look more carefully at our hiring processes and promotion processes inside the organization, to look at any of the systemic barriers, to review policies and programs related to human resources and to hiring. And the disaggregated data that I mentioned, I think, is going to, it's helping us to understand within the representativeness of the public service where there are particular gaps and areas of focus, either in terms of particular functions and communities and different racialized Canadians, different racialized groups, and how they may be represented and underrepresented. That will really help, I think, to ensure that we have a much broader and comprehensive approach going forward in terms of improving the representation of Black employees as well as other racialized groups.
Madame la Présidente, j'espère que j'ai quelques...
Madam Chair, I hope I still have a few minutes.
Je vais très...
Vous avez 30 secondes. Mr. Wallace, you talked about the importance of changing the culture in terms of how we could have a situation that is different in order to compensate for all the problems we had with Phoenix. Could you, in 15 seconds, give us a big picture of the lessons learned and what you're putting in for the new next-gen system so that public servants can be paid properly?
Just very, very briefly, that the original Phoenix was done just incredible, ridiculous, catastrophic tunnel vision, people making decisions without information, without sharing the information. We've made sure that NextGen is far more broadly based, infinitely more exclusive, done on an iterative, agile, step-by-step basis. And the most recent Auditor General look-see at that, published in February of this year, confirms that we're on the right track. We're not claiming victory yet, but we're certainly in a much, much better place.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fergus and Mr.
Merci.
Wallace. We will now move on to Mr. Blanchette-Junca for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first of all, I also wish to send wishes for quick recovery to the clerk of the Privy Council, but I will be more brief given that I have less time that some of my colleagues. Hello, or good day to you, these witnesses. So I have a question for Mr. Wallace and Mr. Huppé, according on the subject of the Phoenix pay system. I have had to intervene in many files because some public servants are really living a horrible experience. I have heard evidence on bankruptcy, divorces, and even suicides. So I know you have encouraging words in terms of better management of pay and talking about technological project, but it doesn't reassure me until I'm told that the problem will be dealt with entirely. You've talked about the competencies of managers who are there. So if people needed to improve their level of competency, have done it. If the people who didn't have the right competencies, right capability, have they been replaced?
Answers to the question, and much appreciated. The actual performance of Phoenix is getting better, but we are of course on our way to replace the system, which is the ultimate objective. But the backlog and other aspects have been improving gradually over time. There remains a relentless focus on two critical components. The first is making sure that the existing Phoenix system does perform better, and as I've indicated, we've seen much better outcomes and results from that, and a gradual whittling down of the backlog and reduction in the harms done. But that remains a very real and pressing concern. We continue to work very directly with our employees, bargaining agents, and others to try and improve the performance. More fundamentally, we're focused on the competencies necessary to get a new system in place. That is being put in place by our colleagues at Shared Services Canada. As I've indicated, we believe that we are on the right track in terms of the procurement process. The Auditor General has reviewed the initial steps and has commented favorably on this. But frankly, it's a long way to go, and we will need to develop significant new competencies in the application of software and a service, which is not something the Government of Canada has done before. So with ROC and with our new project management standards, we are looking forward to develop those competencies and make sure that we are in a position to deliver excellent results on a going forward basis. Luc, anything would you like to add?
Pas beaucoup nécessairement. Je pense que
Not necessarily. I think that the last point is important. One of the most important things is to make sure that we understand what competencies are needed, that we have the right people. We've developed competency profiles. We're working with the School of Public Service to make sure that training is improved. There has been some improvement, but it needs to improve further. We're working with some universities to try and look at the programs that might be useful. And I think that this will continue for the coming months and the coming years to improve the competencies of people and to try and improve their chances of being successful, because these are complex projects and we have to make sure we give them the tools that are necessary to take on these challenges. Thank you. Well, just to understand, the people who did not have the competencies, were there people who were laid off or who were moved to other departments, to other positions? I understand that I can't ignore people who committed suicide because of the incompetency of some people. So is there an accountability for the people who committed these errors?
General nature of this answer. I've been part of the Government of Canada since 2018, and obviously joined at a point after much of the original concerns with Phoenix had been realized. The questions have, I believe, been asked historically, and I believe that the government has indicated or that accountabilities have been realized, but that these are confidential HR matters. And I don't believe that I have specific additional information that I can share with the committee about the events of 2015, 2016, 17, and 18. I apologize for not having this information. I don't know if others may have additional information they can share, but I believe that this is covered by the broad confidentiality provisions of employment law.
Est-ce que ce serait possible d'avoir une réponse du ministère s'il y a des données?
Would it possibly to have an answer from the department if there are public data on this? So another line of questioning is still on Phoenix. In the recommendation of the OAG in 2018, there are some striking things. The OAG mentioned that there was a lack of information from high officials related to in terms of deputy ministers. So there was a big mess up. So in February 2021, we were still learning that there are the same things in the OAG's report. So there's a lack of communications with the higher officials. So has there been a change of culture and has there been a change of policies on your side?
Very much appreciate the question, and it's absolutely critical question. I do not believe that was the finding of the Auditor General in the February 2020 report, but that's a different dialogue, respectfully. There is a change of policy. There is a change of culture. We are in the process of putting it in place. One of the most fundamental things, and I will ask Roch to deal with this, is that in the Phoenix context, hard, solid information that should have been available to decision makers that showed the true state of the progress instead of the wished state of the progress was not made available through the chain of command up to deputy ministers. That was an unacceptable error. We're working hard to make sure that that is corrected in a couple of different mechanisms, including peer supervision, the gating project I talked about earlier, the competencies, but most fundamentally, we are dedicating significant internal audit resources to monitor projects in real time and provide an independent and direct flow of information to decision makers. Roch, would you like to comment on that as well?
I'm sorry, we are well out of time. Perhaps we can get back to that answer later during the rounds of questioning. I now need to move to Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Thank you. I want to begin by just noting how when senior management and the deputies come before this committee and come before all committees, it feels like a little bit about being in the hot seat. I want to preface my comments by saying that I'm going to go hard on an issue, but I'm certainly not going hard on a person. So I just want to be very clear about that, that by no way is this line going to be a personal line of questioning, because when we talk about these conversations, they're often very difficult for people to explore, and I want to be able to unpack it in a thoughtful way. But I'll begin with Ms. Sherman. In the presentation, in your opening remarks, you made specific references to anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion. And some of these comments have not sat well with me. I'll be very clear. Specifically, you noted that communities and networks of diverse public servants have been working to advance equity and inclusion in our organization. And yet, in nowhere in this statement have you acknowledged the fact that there are over 500 Black employees engaging in an unprecedented class action lawsuit based on the culture, not just now, but for the last 50 years, which include the wrongful failure to promote, the intentional infliction of mental suffering, constructive dismissal, wrongful termination, negligence, and in particular, violations of employment law, human rights law, and charter breaches as put forward in their claim. And so while in your opening remarks, you state that efforts are ongoing, but there's still not enough progress, I would agree with that. But yet, when you make the assertion that on January 22nd, the clerk releases a call to action of anti-racism, equity, and inclusion in the federal public service, I'm wondering why we weren't just candid with the fact that this is likely in response to the class action lawsuit. So can we start there? And again, this is about a difficult conversation around anti-Black racism. That's tough to have. It's not personal. It's not about you. It's about the public service and the way this is being presented.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. It is an important one, and it is an important conversation, as you've said. I think that certainly my reference to the work that has been done is really, it is an acknowledgement that there have been people working on better equity and inclusion in the public service for many years, a long time. There have been many reports and efforts to identify recommendations and actions that need to be taken. And so it was not, I think it was really meant to acknowledge that work and to, as the clerk's call to action has pointed out, we have not made the progress that we need to. We have not spent the time looking carefully and at our particular processes and systems that do have some level of of bias, and that we need to understand those. I'm not in a position, of course, to comment on any cases that are before the courts, and I won't go there. I think that the
I
call
will,
to
I will,
action.
and I'm going to interject there. I will. You might not want to, and I'll set aside the compensation, right? Because that would include, perhaps getting into an area in which you don't want to go. But I can't understand how when the clerk is making the assertion that many organizations are creating anti-racism task force, advancing dialogue to better understand and address what is transpiring in the workplace, you have an entire subset of your service who are calling for a Black Equity Commission. That you can appoint somebody that is a central coordinating entity to carry out and investigate these challenges. I can share with you that having this as a piecemeal department by department response would be wholly inadequate. There's been a call for equitable representation as per the employment law. There's been a call for the ability for self-declaration. There's been a call for external reporting mechanisms, your own reports, and what we're dealing with today, talking about culture, talking about the fear for people to kind of go along with with the higher ups. Like, I'm wondering, why would the clerk and the public service try to parallel a discussion that has already been kind of framed by some of the most egregious claims against the public service, rather than just work with these public sector workers to help negotiate, equitable resolutions for this?
Thank you. I think I am not trying to say that there are not discussions on both levels. My point about the court case is that I'm not in a position to comment on the specifics of that. As it is advancing through the legal system, and it will be addressed and worked through. And I think we have to realize that that's one thing that is happening. The call to action and our efforts to improve things in the workplace in a real way, based on people's lived experience, and to better understand that lived experience, can work in complementarity with that. It is not to say one takes over or subsumes the other. We obviously want to have these efforts underway to improve things, to understand what they are, to improve them, and to keep working with racialized Canadians, including Black communities of federal public servants. And so I don't want to have created the impression that we are not interested in addressing these kinds of concerns. Those are the things that we are looking at when we are trying to explore programs and policies, as I referred to, within our organizations. Hiring processes. We have examples in some of our northern regional agency where they are working to actually build a more inclusive approach to hiring Indigenous people in the North, in order to make sure that we don't have a system that just that doesn't relate to the cultural reality of their world. And so we are working on things.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sherman, we have gone well over time. Thank you very much, Mr. Green, for that very tough but critical conversation, for starting that. We will now move to our 5-minute round, and we will start with Mr. Lawrence for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, and appreciate you all appearing, and always very impressed by the civil service, and both of you with your candid answers. But I would just like to give an opportunity, maybe 30 seconds of my time, to Ms. Sherman if she wanted to finish up her answer. I thought it was a very important conversation that Mr. Green and Ms. Sherman were having.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think my point in that example was simply to say that we are working at the very grassroots level to try and make sure that there are more culturally appropriate and sensitive processes and systems within the federal public service. And that's just one small example. All departments, as by virtue of the call to action, as well as the commitments that the clerk has put out to deputy ministers and other GICs, to look very closely at how we do our work and how to improve it in an inclusive way that will help to build a much better foundation where all voices and perspectives can be respected. Thank you for that time.
No, thank you very much for that important conversation. I'm going to switch directions here. I want to talk a little bit about modernization here going forward. I think we've litigated the Phoenix Pay issue to a great extent, and appreciate particularly you, Mr. Wallace, and your candid and honest answer. That's how we change things. But looking at the world in sort of a broader scope here, I see a number of issues, whether it be the CRA talking to HRSDC, or the cyber breaches that happened at the CRA, or the fact that Canada lags behind the European Union, Australia, the United States in money spent on R&D to GDP. These are challenges, and I believe that the next 10, 15, 20 years will be dominated by those countries that can get ahead and modernize. So Mr. Wallace said you've been spectacularly honest and candid, but perhaps you could put a forward-looking lens on how can Canada, particularly the government, capture the future by leading, not just fixing, but leading in modernization and IT development.
Yeah, it's an absolutely great question, and I think it's just a massive obsession. And I will, and unfortunately, I almost always start off with a negative. My colleagues are tired and annoyed by this, but we do actually have to acknowledge we're in a pretty big hole from a lack of some fundamental investments in some of our income support and immigration and other systems. So frankly, we got to spend some time making sure that, I'm 60 odd years old and we got code that's as old as me, and we got to make sure it's stabilized. And we got to make sure that it's got servers that will continue to function and the mainframes are still alive and stuff like that. And that's necessary, difficult, but absolutely critical work in the public interest. So we got to make sure that that stuff actually works, doesn't blow up. That's job one. Job two is to actually figure out what our clients need, what the policies are that serve our clients and that's citizens, and then to actually understand how we bridge from that mainframe, ancient COBOL code or other words into a more modern, responsive, digital, agile mechanism. And that involves two parts. First of all, there's a profound necessary need for technical competencies. We need to understand how software as a service works. We need to understand and be a participant in that market, acquire the competencies. We also need to understand fundamentally how Canadians want to interface with the government and how they will use digital tools to interface with us. And we need to bring those things together. That's exactly what we're trying to do right now. And it's an incredibly interesting set of pieces. I'll add one other point, which I think is fundamental. Governments are a big part of the economy. They generate a tremendous amount of information. That information has value, both positive and negative, and appropriate, solid, open government and open data strategies or data management strategies at the Government of Canada level will be a significant improvement in terms of our competitiveness. And I'll add one other piece, because I have been a provincial deputy of finance and provincial clerk, which is the integration at a PT level is a non-trivial, really interesting but non-trivial challenge. I recommend all of these things as kind of fundamental ways to make sure that we enhance the competitiveness going forward. And I do very much appreciate the forward-looking lens. I think I share your view that it's critical.
Thank you. Do I have any time, Madam Chair?
You still have 30 seconds.
All right, terrific. So very quickly then, what can I do as a member of parliament, or what could the government do to help you with your work? Man, there's so much I'd love to unpack there. But what are the barriers that you're having from government? What can we do to help you modernize the civil service?
So it's not just a question of modernizing the civil servants, but the basic and fundamental error error is the wrong word. Fundamentally, we need to start for what is it from a citizen perspective, and how do we design from a citizen perspective and make sure that we always include that that lens from a policy, from an implementation, from an impact, and from a digital or information technology perspective. As long as we start with the user, we'll be on a good track.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to Mr. Blois for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for their testimony and their opportunity to be here with us today. One of the, and Mr. Wallace spoke to this about not grudgingly accepting, but accepting full terms some of the Auditor General's reports. Particularly one of those elements was IT and the renewal of infrastructure that's needed for our civil service to be able to do its work in the 21st century and certainly in 2021. I'm curious as to whether or not that work that was started by our public service to respond to the calls by the Auditor General was helpful in the midst of the pandemic, where we were asking a lot of our civil servants to perhaps work from home, and whether or not you can expand on some of the challenges that happened during the pandemic as we tried to continue that important work, but maybe not have as many people gathered in one place in our downtown buildings, perhaps.
So I'll take an initial stab at this and perhaps turn to Roch or Janine if they have additional pieces. But a year ago, the idea that we would not be in the office was just an impossibility, and frankly, 11 or 10 months ago, it was still pretty frightening, and we were scrambling to pressure Bell to give us more call lines and a variety of things like that. Our colleagues at Shared Services Canada were able to upgrade our laptops, find us bandwidth, find access to the cloud, roll out Microsoft 365 as a fundamental tool for us on just an amazingly rapid basis, along with the supports and other aspects to make that real. And I think it basically shows that with some focus and capacity, we can do things at a very, very different way. And that's kind of the critical thing that's allowed colleague departments to do things like deliver Service Canada benefits remotely and a variety of other pieces. We're now in a position where, and this matters in terms of diversity and inclusion, it matters fundamentally in terms of the access to technical talent, it matters fundamentally in terms of our ability to understand the needs of Canadians and not just driven from a national capital region office tower. We're now in, I think, a much, much better place, and I don't want to take advantage of the tragedy of Phoenix, and I certainly don't want to take advantage of the ongoing tragedy of the pandemic, but frankly, we have shown a great deal more flexibility and focus than I would have thought possible. And I think as we begin to absorb some of these lessons, we're going to realize that our ability to serve Canadians where they are, and our ability to work with Canadians where they are, and ability to employ Canadians where they live will be just enormously important, and I think is quite hopeful going forward. I don't think this is going to be an easy journey. I think we do need to understand it and be thoughtful, but I think there are some really, frankly, profound opportunities, and I look forward to much, much stronger representation and a public service that ultimately is more representative of the diversity of Canadians geographically and in almost every other respect. And frankly,
Mr.
one
Walsh,
of the challenges we had.
Mr. Walsh, sorry, I only have so much time, and you're very eloquent, but I do want to get a few more. And I guess what I would say is I appreciate where your question and your answer were going, because as an MP in a rural area, the idea that we can have some of these important jobs, you mentioned diversity on the basis of we have a whole lot of different factors, but indeed the opportunities for rural Canadians to take advantage of some of these opportunities that are available through the Government of Canada is something that I think is important and really can lead opportunities even in our greening of government strategy on reducing emissions. You talked about culture, and of course, Mr. Green had, certainly very important questions around aspects of marginalized Canadians. I want to talk about culture around new public management and how we incentivize the public sector to not be so risk adverse, but to, as you mentioned, be citizen focused and not necessarily process focused. Can you speak to some of the initiatives that perhaps your department has taken on to incentivize the private sector, maybe under the strategy of new public management that has certainly emerged in the last couple of decades?
So a really interesting and great question. fundamentally, what public servants need to do is make sure, and this goes back to my answer to Mr. Lawrence as well, we need to just spend a lot more time understanding what the impacts of our programs are, where they have an impact on Canadians regionally, diverse communities, all of those other pieces, and build back and understand what that is. And fundamentally, whether we call new public management as whether we call it by all sorts of different names, or even if we go back to earlier concepts like management by results, it is actually just fundamentally looking at the outcomes and then working backwards from the intended policy outcome in conjunction with the policies and fiscal directions of the government of the day. That's got to be accompanied with a little bit of fearless advice as well.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I think that's our chair. That's my time. Sorry.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Blois. I appreciate that you keep track of that. We will now go to our 2.5-minute round, and we will start with Mr. Blanchette-Jocas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to talk about a catastrophic file that I mentioned earlier, the famous Phoenix file. I would tell Mr. Walz I share what Mr. Green has said. There's nothing personal with the difficult questions we're asking you today, but I cannot ignore the fact that I'm really angry about all these problems that are the result because of the incompetence of people who are managing the pay system, the Phoenix system. I don't want to know the names of those people. I just want to know what happens if those people don't have the competencies. They should be moved to another department. We have to find the people who have the right competencies to deal with the problem. So if there's an accountant who does not make the pay checks on time, then that person has to be removed. The culture that seems to be present is one of impunity, so there are no consequences. What we want to know is what have the staff changes been in that regard?
Question, and I do think it's fundamental, and I have an ongoing and strong interest in the accountability file, so don't want to dodge the question. I can only speak to the period I have personal experience, which is after 2018 in my experience in the government of Canada. And our colleagues at the responsible department, which is Public Services Procurement Canada, have brought in new executives, including executives, I believe, Ms. Sherman, at the associate or deputy minister level, have driven change, have made sure, and I've certainly chaired and co-chaired the committees to make sure that we have excellent visibility into information, new standards, lay out new processes, and a variety of other things to make sure that we are both stopping the error rate, lowering and making progress on the unacceptable and remains too high backlog, but we're continuing to make progress on those, and that there has been a huge emphasis on assuring that the appropriate level of executive authority, but also just general talent and capacity, including in Miramichi, is available and operationally put in place. The other piece is that we have put in place for each deputy minister's performance contract, and we do monitor and measure this, a need for them to provide timely information into the pay center and a variety of other pieces. So we've incentivized this at the highest level on a going forward basis. And those reforms have not been perfect, but they've been by and large successful in terms of improving the performance. The other aspect we've done, and it is fundamental, and this was a fundamental error made earlier, is there was no engagement with bargaining agents. There continues to be significant engagement on Phoenix and also on a going forward basis on Next Generation with bargaining agents, with our union representative.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wallace. I'm sorry to have to cut you off. We will now go to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Just picking up again on where we're at with the Black class action and the decision of this government not to enter into, with good faith, mediation with a significant segment of their workforce who are bringing in not just complaints, but a plan, quite frankly, that is a plan coming from lived experience and coming from addressing the cultural inadequacies that have been presented. And I think, quite frankly, they've been admitted to in so many different ways throughout these conversations. So I'm going to go back to Ms. Sherman and ask if it's the case that the government is unwilling to mediate, that they're going to drag this out. This is going to be a 15-year class action suit with infinite resources of the Crown. How are you then dealing with the equity issues around your Black workers in parallel with this claim? Is it going to be the government's position that because there's a class action claim with Black workers that they're going to be unwilling to address these issues, or perhaps get movement on some of the issues that have been brought forward? Like, what happens? Does the issue then go into abeyance because of legality?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You've raised an important perspective, and I think what I've tried to put forward, without commenting on the government's approach on the legal on the case, the class action, and how that will be managed. I mean, it is going to have to progress through legal channels. We will not stop working collaboratively.
Just to be clear, just to be clear, I only have 2.5 minutes.
Yep.
There was an opportunity to mediate, right? Like, that was a decision that the government made where they could have worked and mediated this in a non-confrontational, non-adversarial way, but instead you're going to lawyer up. So that was a choice.
And I am not in a position to speak to that choice, but what I do want to say in the short time we have is that, we are working very intensively and collaboratively with employee groups, the Federal Black Employee Caucus, the Network of Black Executives, all of those initiatives to continue this conversation and to bring some of these issues forward and to help us tackle those in the system that we are working in now are very important and tied to the call to action. They're tied to our focus through renewal on diversity and inclusion, and so that will not stop. And in fact, it's all the more important that we make sure that we have a workplace that is inclusive, that recognizes those concerns. And so I don't want to position these two things. They are separate. One is going to go through the legal system, but within the public service and the renewal focus that we have, we are very, very committed to doing that work with individuals and with communities.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sherman. With that, this hour has come to an end. I would like to thank you, Ms. Sherman, and Mr. Wallace and Mr. Hupé for joining us. Thank you for your testimony, and I will invite you to leave, and we will suspend for 1 minute as we prepare for the second hour. Thank you. to our witnesses. Members joining us for our second panel from the Department of Finance are Michael J. Sabia, Deputy Minister, and Andrew Marsland, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Tax Policy Branch. Mr. Sabia, you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to Andrew and I to be here today. In the department, although we continue to be very focused on the immediate issues related to the COVID-19 pandemic, the department nonetheless continues to work on a full range of other issues, important issues facing the country, as does this committee with its work on the taxation of electronic commerce. Vos travaux sur l'imposition du commerce.
Your work on taxation of electronic commerce reflects the fact that our lives are currently happening online more and more. For a number of years, the Department of Finance has been engaged in working to ensure that firms that engage in electronic commerce collect the appropriate taxes on their activity in Canada. This recently culminated in the announcement in the 2020 Fall Economic Statement of a number of changes that will level the playing field between foreign and domestic vendors by ensuring that the GST/HST applies to goods and services consumed in Canada, regardless of how they are supplied.
Has specifically asked us for an estimate of the revenues that might have been generated in 2017 from the extension of the GST to digital goods and services supplied by non-resident companies. In the department's initial answer to that question from your committee, I understand that we noted that revenues were likely to be broadly in line with the estimate produced by the Office of the Auditor General. And I'll come back to that in a moment. In the course of briefing ministers in the government, the department, as you know, produces numerous and successive estimates of revenues that might be raised from a wide range of potential policy actions or as a result of economic developments that affect the tax system. These estimates are often for economic activity that is not currently subject to taxation and for which there is little or no data available on the underlying economic activity itself. Donc, par conséquent, les estimations produites.
So, in consequence, these estimates produced by the department often change and evolve over time, sometimes significantly. The estimates evolve as more and better data becomes available, and as the department and other agencies come to better understand the nature, the scope, and the prevalence of the underlying economic activity. Obviously, this was the case with the development of electronic commerce. The department has been analyzing this activity for several years, and the Office of the Auditor General's 2019 spring audit found, and I'm quote, that the Department of Finance Canada conducted sound analyses in that regard.
Most recently, the department did prepare estimates of the revenue that would be generated for the period 2021-22 to the period 2024-25, resulting from the specific proposal for the taxation of digital goods and services that was set out in the 2020 Fall Economic Statement. So as part of its ongoing analysis and using the specific model of the tax change proposed in the economic statement, the department has produced an estimate of the revenues that would have been generated in 2017 from such a tax. This estimate suggests that revenues from such a tax in 2017-18 could have amounted to approximately $160 million. As I said at the outset, an estimate that's very close to the Auditor General's, which I think was at $169 million. So essentially the same number. Now, that being said, I do want to reiterate that the figure is only an estimate, and such an estimate, as with figures, lots of figures published in the fall statement, it's also likely to change as the data on the current and past level of e-commerce activity are revised. Donc, Madame la Présidente,
So, Madam Chair, I hope that this information will be useful to the committee, and I want to reiterate that the revenue estimates of this nature, where the underlying activity is evolving rapidly and therefore lose meaning and value as more and better data become available.
Say, and I want to emphasize that we in the Department of Finance very much recognize the value and importance of transparency with this committee. Hence our willingness to present that number to you today. And by the way, if you want the numbers for subsequent years, we're happy to provide those as well. And so we certainly recognize the importance of doing that, and we will endeavor to act in a manner consistent with that principle of transparency, recognizing, obviously, as we also do, the importance of our ability to provide confidential advice to ministers. So I think with that, I'll stop, and Andrew and I would be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sabia. We will now go to our round of questioning, starting with our 6-minute round. Mr. Lawrence.
Perfect. And thank you, Mr. Sabia and Mr. Marsland, for attending today. Very much appreciated. My questions will all revolve around Mr. Leswick's testimony last time and the responses there too. I have no intention of playing gotcha, but I think there were some mistakes made, and I would just like to give you the opportunity to clarify a couple of issues. So Mr. Leswick said, when talking about the carbon tax, it does go back through the climate action incentive payment that is administered through personal income tax. It doesn't go back to the government of jurisdiction. Isn't it true that that is not a completely true statement, as in fact a portion of it goes back to the provinces, municipalities, and other levels of government?
Andrew, you want to?
Yes, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. If I understand the question correctly, and let me state my understanding of it, is that where the federal backstop applies, the fuel charge, revenues are raised in a particular province, and the approach there is that approximately 90% of those revenues are returned to households in advance, actually, when individuals in that province file their tax returns. The climate action incentive payment in aggregate represents about 90% of those amounts. The remaining 10% are directed through programming to support small and medium enterprises and other entities in specific support programs, with the principle being that 100% of the proceeds of the fuel charge.
Thank you, Mr. Marsland. But the reality is those redirected funds, as you mentioned, actually go through the government. So it is fair to say that while there may be an argument that it could be revenue neutral, the carbon tax, it is certainly not expense neutral to the individuals, as only 90% is returned directly to taxpayers. Is that correct?
Yeah, 90% are returned through the climate action incentive program, approximately, and the remaining 10% are returned through other mechanisms.
And in addition to that, it affects different people differently, in that people have different lifestyles. People out in rural areas are disproportionately hurt in terms of the amount of money that they usually spend on carbon tax as they drive longer, may use other fuels to heat their homes, and so it's not a perfect fit. In fact, there will be many Canadians, perhaps millions of Canadians, who actually pay more in carbon tax than they receive for the rebate. Is that correct? And do you have numbers of telling us how many Canadians are out of pocket because of the carbon tax?
Unfortunately, Madam Chair, I don't have the numbers with me at the moment, but the reality is that the majority of households receive more back than the incidents. Now, as the question accurately notes, I mean, it depends entirely on the expenditures of a particular household. But in aggregate terms, the majority of households receive more back.
But unfortunately, Mr. Marsland, Canadians don't live in aggregate. They live in individual lives. And for many of them, it's a burden that they can't afford. In addition to that, Mr. Leswick said, in response to my question, whether GST is payable by on the carbon tax. His response, no, I'm sorry. So he responded in the negative. But that's not true, is it? In fact, that's a very misleading statement, isn't it, Mr. Marsland?
Well, the way the fuel charge works is that it's applied at the fuel distribution level, so it is built into prices. So to the extent that the product being bought is subject to GST, then GST will apply on that product.
Yeah. So Mr. Leswick misspoke there. In addition, is that GST always returned to the Canadians, or is that an additional cost that wouldn't exist without the carbon tax? That's not always returned to the taxpayers.
I think the question it depends in terms of whether or not more GST is collected in aggregate, given that obviously expenditure patterns change, but that's the GST isn't calculated into the climate action incentive payment now.
So in sum, the GST is not returned to the Canadians, which is charged on top of the carbon tax. That's a tax on a tax. In addition to that, at least 10% of the carbon tax is not returned directly to taxpayers. So it is certainly cannot be in any way thought to be expenditure neutral for our consumers, for our Canadian taxpayers.
I think there's a point here that needs to be made, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but given the way it applies to businesses in addition to others, and then depending on the final incidence, it could well be the case, and in fact, I think we believe it very much is the case, that in refunding the tax to individuals and to households, it is very likely that we are refunding to individuals and households somewhat more than they would actually pay, because some of the incidence of that tax falls on companies, and it's individuals who are fully compensated for it through the refund process. And Andrew, have I got that right?
That's correct. I mean, the incidence is calculated both by the direct and indirect impacts on houses, but of course, climate action payment is an amount, a definite amount. And to the extent that businesses pay the GST, they would receive an input tax credit, of course.
That wasn't my fault.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping that we could come back to this line of questioning later on. We are well over time, and I need to move on to our next questioner, which is Mr. Longfield, for 6 minutes.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Actually, it's Ms. Yip. She may be generous and share with me, but it's over to her if that's okay.
That's totally fine. Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Ms. Yip.
Thank you, Mr. Sabia and Mr. Marsland, for coming today. Mr. Sabia, can you comment on the ability of your department to digitalize government services? How we can provide this efficiently and timely to Canadians?
This is an area where, as I'm sure you know, a number of different government departments are working on this, and it continues to be certainly a priority from our point of view. The area of that we're most familiar with and closest to is in the work of the Canada Revenue Agency to streamline and more efficiently digitize the interactions between individual Canadians and Canadian businesses, and in this case, the taxation authority. So that's an area where, we continue to be focused, where we continue to invest money to improve those systems. But the same issue is true across a variety of other areas, be they customs operations at borders, where there are opportunities to improve and to make those borders, to reduce the level of friction, as the jargon goes, at the border by making them more streamlined. The same thing is true with respect to immigration, with respect to visas. I mean, there's a whole range of areas where the government continues to be focused on that issue, and where we continue to make progress, and hopefully will continue to make progress over the coming period.
It seems that so many of these large government IT projects are prone to not doing so well. I think of Phoenix. Do you think that there's enough funding there?
I can't comment on Phoenix.
Not Phoenix, but in your area.
I only returned to the government whenever that was, middle of December or so. So I can't comment on things that, other than having read about it in the newspapers, as we all did for a long period of time. So I can't comment on that. But look, I think it's a big task, and it's not going to be resolved tomorrow. I also think, though, it's a very important task, and part of ensuring that the country is well equipped for the future. So we are continuing to look from a Department of Finance point of view, and from an expenditure allocation point of view. We continue to look for opportunities to accelerate that work, and to continue to fund that work in a way that's, everything is choices with respect to expenditure allocation, but in a manner that treats this with the priority that it warrants. So resources will be allocated to it on that basis, and I think they have been in the past. These are, as these are big, complex systems, and having lived through lots of IT implementations during my many years in the private sector, I can tell you that they're difficult in the private sector, they're difficult in the public sector. It requires a lot of time and attention and resources, and I believe that the resources will be there as required.
Perhaps there needs to be more pilot programs within the design of these IT projects, testing things out before you spend larger amounts, and to ensure the stability of the infrastructure.
Yeah, I think that, I'm not an expert in the implementation, what has happened in the public sector in the implementation of these programs, but doing pilots, taking incremental approaches to these things, these are all pretty much standard practices in large-scale implementations of systems changes, and I'm sure that those best practices are being used by the government. But again, I have to say I'm not an expert.
Okay. Madam Chair, how much time do I have left?
You have approximately 1 minute and 15 seconds.
Okay, I will turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Longfield.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Yip. And maybe I'll be sharing my time with Mr. Cerbero when that time comes around. Mr. Sabia, regarding the timeliness of responses that we're getting back from your department, we've had some discussions at committee on what's a reasonable amount of time. Some of our reports have been delayed as we've been waiting for responses. Could you maybe comment on, we're looking at 3 weeks maybe as a, not maybe, but we're setting that as a committee standard to ask for responses to come back within 3 weeks of asking a question. Could you maybe comment on what process has to be followed up from your end, and whether 3 weeks is reasonable for most questions that we might be asking?
Well, again, Madam Chair, I'm recently arrived, so I can't comment on the history because I honestly don't know what the interval of time has been on average in the department's responses to your committee. So, Mr. Longfield, if you were able to contribute to my education there, I'm all ears as to what that period of time has been.
Speaking of time, I think I'm out of it, but we might be able to pick it up later.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, oh, I see. Okay.
He was.
I wasn't able to give you much of an answer there. I feel bad.
We'll circle back. Thank you very much.
Okay. I thought we had 6 minutes, but I guess I misunderstood what's going on. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Sabia and Mr. Longfield. We will now move to Mr. Blanchette-Joncan for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to everyone. My first question is for Mr. Sabia. Thank you for coming today. I looked at your brief opening remarks. You're saying that we can't necessarily draw conclusions from the tax figures for 1 year because it doesn't enlighten us on it. But the Office of the Auditor General have carried out a study on that period. So it is just an estimate. And when I asked Madame Bogman in November, she said that the office made some evaluations on data that are public information. So are you saying that the OAG invented these figures? Not at all. I'm a bit surprised by your question, and it's quite possible that I didn't understand it clearly. But my point was, yes, in such a field, you do have to make estimates, but that's the case in many fields in terms of revenues from certain fiscal systems. And I gave you a figure of 160 million, which is essentially at the same level as was estimated by the Auditor General. So I believe that essentially the estimates by the Department of Finance and by the Auditor General are essentially on the same page. So it was not at all my intention to tell you that the Auditor General created such an estimate from thin air. No, I believe they also did good work, and we did at the department, and I think that the proof of it is the fact that both estimates are essentially the same. Thank you. This answers my question. So you said earlier that in the OAG report that the Department of Finance carried out a rigorous analysis, but it also states that the Department of Finance Canada had also calculated what was still needed in taxes in terms of GST. So what could have been recovered versus what was recovered. Are you saying that the 160 million is your calculation? It's an estimate of the revenues which would have been available in a world where that component of GST had been operating in 2017. So it's our estimate of the revenue. So I just want to understand, you're telling me that $160 is your estimate by the Department of Finance for 2017 in terms of what was missing in the GST. Yes, 160 million. Well, that's not a small figure. As an example, there is currently a dispute with Veterans Affairs that has been around for 11 years after an accounting error, and 160 million would allow to compensate for that. And Ms. Hogan, the Auditor General, had said that their estimate, 169 million, was a underestimate. So I imagine it's more. So you have prepared analyses, but you're saying there's no data that allows corroboration of the estimate by the OAG. So I'm trying to understand. You said that you sent the government some analyses. What is your role with the government? So was this data that you didn't want to give us earlier, or was the government who didn't want to give us earlier? Madam Chair, I find myself in a situation that's a bit problematic here, so I don't want to make any comments on the orientations or the activities of the department in the past. My point today is that I'm quite comfortable to share this estimate with your committee, but I'm not able to say if that represents a change or not. But it is our intention currently to act in a spirit of transparency, because I believe that in such a situation, we are able to share this without any risk to our fundamental role, which is to develop important advice to our minister and through our minister to the government. So I understand that this makes you uncomfortable. It's your predecessor. We questioned the department twice. So in February, the president...
Sorry, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, you're well over time. Perhaps you can follow up in the 2.5-minute round. We will now move to Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Madam Chair, you're doing a fantastic job. I appreciate the laneway you're giving us in the spirit, the nonpartisan way in which my good friend, Mr. Lawrence, gave me some laneway for the answer. I believe Mr. Sabia has been by this committee twice. I'm kind of expended on my line of questioning, but I'm really interested in Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, so I'm happy to concede my time to Mr. Blanchet-Jonca if he wants to continue down his line of questioning, because if I recall, this was something that was very important to him. So I'm happy to do that. Feel free to take it away, Mr. Blanchet, if that's okay by you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely, it's your time, and if you would like to cede it to another member, you're perfectly able to do that.
I just want to go on the record and let it be known that the Bloc cannot say I never gave him anything. So today I'm giving my friend, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, my time.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je remercie sincèrement mon collègue, Monsieur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I sincerely thank my colleague, Mr. Green. So I'll continue in this vein. Mr. Sabia, I understand it's the second time you've been appearing at the committee. So I think it was, it's been 3 or 4 months that we've been waiting for that figure that you're giving us now, an estimate of 160 million. So I'd like to understand today why it required 2 written requests from the committee to the finance and a letter from the president, the chair of the committee to your department, and also having your appearance at the Public Accounts Committee to get this answer. So I understand there are issues of confidentiality and the analyses that you've carried out in the government, but I understand that that the OAG files a report, I think we have to get these specifications in that nonpartisan office. So do you want to protect this impartiality? Madam Chair, Unfortunately, I didn't understand your question. I understood the words, but I didn't understand the point of your question. Could you simply repeat it in another way? Yes, it's simple. You were talking about transparency. I'm trying to understand why it took 3 months to obtain a figure that you already had in your possession. Yes, that's a very reasonable question. And what I can tell you, and I'm repeating myself a bit here, obviously I always try to respect the past orientations of an organization, in this case, the Department of Finance, but also we have to find ways of having these practices and orientations evolve. And that's the reason why I understand that in the past, maybe there was a certain reticence to disclose such a figure. Why? To better respect the important principle of the confidentiality of our advice to the government. But in such a situation, my reading of the situation, and Andrew is in complete agreement, we are able to share such a figure without it being a risk to this other dimension of our activities. And that's why we made the decision to share this in a spirit of transparency. Thank you, Mr. Sabia. I appreciate that you're sharing this. I admit that I would have preferred you had shared it earlier because some of the work we're doing was delayed because of that. But I'm trying to understand, is this estimate, which hasn't been made public earlier, was that because the department felt that it was confidential information supplied to the minister? No, the decision to share this figure is a decision that we took at the department ourselves as officials. So it's not something that reflects in any way the presence or the intervention on the part of our two ministers. I'd like to understand one thing, Mr. Sabia. The Quebec government in 2017 had already made public their estimates of loss of Quebec sales tax, $270 million. Why is the federal government not able to share this? Why did it take from our committee 2 written letters and also a letter from the chair of a standing committee of the Canadian Parliament, and then again an appearance by the Deputy Minister of Finance to give us this figure? So, Madam Chair, and Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, obviously I was not there. The only thing I can tell you is that we respect the importance of acting in a transparent way with your committee. And recently we have slightly changed our attitude to these issues. So I believe that it was a reasonable decision on our part to share this figure and to act, as I was saying, in a slightly more transparent way, and I have no problem with that. But as to your question, I'm not able to explain the activities of the department in the past. I can just tell you that some of these activities have changed and others will change. Perfect. So while I do expect that there be transparency, here we have to be accountable by asking questions. I understand you weren't there, but there were people who were answering for the department. There were officials. Those people should still be there, unless you tell me that they were fired because they didn't answer with transparency. No, clearly that's not the case.
We will move on to Mr. Berthold for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Savia, for being here. Also, Mr. Marsland. It's the first time that we have the opportunity to talk. It's sure that being appointed Minister of Finance in a pandemic period must be a considerable challenge for you, Mr. Savia. I think you said appointed minister, but I am actually deputy minister. There is a rather big difference between the two. Yes, we will talk about that difference, Mr. Savia. As a deputy minister, you surprised me earlier by saying that you weren't there, and so you can't defend the actions of people or decisions that were made in the past. I was very surprised by that because as a parliamentarian, we have work to do. I'm learning to work with the Committee on Public Accounts, and when we're asked questions, we're a committee where various departments must be accountable, the only committee that acts in a nonpartisan way. So I'm in agreement with my Quebecois colleague to say that it's unacceptable that we've had to ask 3 times at the Department of Finance for one figure and we didn't get an answer. I think Mr. Marsland has been there since the beginning. Mr. Marsland, could you tell us what happened? Why we had not until now been able to get this figure?
To the committee, Madam Chair, was that there was no public figure available, and that was correct. There was no public figure available. As Mr. Sabia mentioned, we do many estimates of many aspects of the tax system, and we do those in the context of providing confidential advice to the government. I think.
Mais je suis d'accord, M. Marsland, sur les conseils confidentiels.
I agree, Mr. Marsland, in terms of confidential advice to the government. But when there are figures that have been calculated that are available at the Department of Finance, the Committee on Public Accounts has the right to ask for those figures. We're not asking for the recommendations related to these numbers. The council. The advice. I'm surprised that your figure is $160, like the estimate by the Auditor General, who told us that it was probably higher than that. So without casting doubt on the figures you're giving us today, I would like to say I'm a bit surprised. And Mr. Sabia, I would like to say that for the Committee on Public Accounts, it's a committee that's accountable to Canadians. You seem to be walking on eggshells when you're answering our questions. I'm surprised because we would really like to have transparency. Your ultimate advice to the government, you can keep that for yourself. But this estimate, what seems so dangerous about giving an evaluation of a shortfall in taxes collected? The reason why, in my comments at the beginning of the meeting today, I said several times I was using that the use of words such as estimate and gradually things evolve. Yes, we have figures, but also our goal is to try to answer to your questions. But that being said, in such a way as to contribute to your capacity to understand the nature of the tax system in this case, and not to make things even more difficult to understand. But Mr. Sabia, I think that you can let the committee members the job of determining if they're mature enough to know if they have the capacity of judging the figures they have. An estimate that was asked for in November, the estimate of 160 million, would have allowed us to continue our work. And it took 2 letters, as my colleague said, and new presence, a new appearance of for you at the committee. Why are parliamentarians not able to understand? Why would they not be able to understand that it's an estimate? So you're doubting the capacity of the MPs to understand that this is an estimate. I have difficulty understanding that, so I think we need a little bit more specifics on that. Honestly, I'm still surprised by your reaction. I said clearly, and now I've repeated myself several times, that we are in the process of changing certain orientations to act with a certain level of transparency that respects the importance of our activities in terms of advising the government. And so I believe that you have before you a demonstration of a certain opening on our part. So I can't really explain to you why in the past someone decided not to share a certain figure with you. I am here with the figure that you've asked for.
Yeah, I appreciate your answer. We will now move on to Mr. Longfield for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be sharing my time with Mr. Sobera. And it has been a good conversation today, just to say, first of all, the importance of us working together and understanding each other's timelines and the work that we're both trying to accomplish on behalf of Canadians. And it is very difficult to give some of these answers in the timelines that you have in terms of within our committee when we have really just a few minutes to get some answers on complicated taxation principles. One for me, Mr. Sabia, is that the GST is collected as a general revenue for the government, and then it goes out as a general expense to the government. And you in a previous answer, you said, you know, sometimes the supplier will have to pay GST, and then that becomes part of their remittance back to the government. It's in a different revenue and expense stream than the levy on fuel surcharge. And as the Conservatives will call it a carbon tax, we call it a levy on surcharge that goes back to Canadians. And so sometimes there's terminology that's also used that confuses the types of information that we're trying to get. Could you maybe comment on the general revenue and general expense on GST versus program revenue and program expense that get reported in the public accounts?
Andrew, you want to take that?
Sure. Madam Chair, if I understand the question correctly, we report GST revenues. I think we report them net of the refundable GST credit, but as the question suggested, these become general revenues. They flow into the consolidated revenue account and are expended out. And I think the distinction was made between that and the fuel charge, where under the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Act, there is a requirement that those amounts be returned to the province through the mechanism of the Climate Action Incentive Payment and other mechanisms, and a requirement to account for those amounts on a periodic basis to show the transparency that those requirements were met.
Yeah, thank you. That answers my question. Mr. Sobera, I think you have a question or two as well in the 2.5 minutes remaining.
Oh, thank you, Lloyd. Welcome, Deputy Minister, to the committee again. Thank you for availing yourself. I wanted to get on the aspect of digitization. You came back today, and we wanted some clarification on the Finance Department's estimates on numbers with regards to digitization in one aspect. But in terms of where we look at the overall economy, and even when we look at the Next Generation EU fund that's been set up with a heavy focus on digitization of not only the European economy, but how that's paramount for all economies. How important is that we take a whole of government approach, working with both industry, private sector, charitable, non-charitable sectors, in terms of how we view digitization?
Yeah, I think it's very important. And if we've learned one thing in this pandemic, it's that digitization and digital access is, it's not a nice to have anymore. It's an absolute fundamental. And in fact, I'd go further than that and say, in terms of the future economic growth of the country, not just digital access in the sense of broadband connectivity, but digitization of businesses, the adoption of digital technology across small and medium businesses. This is an absolutely fundamental, and it should be a national priority, because that's where the jobs and Canada's economic growth will come from in the years ahead. And it's an area where, if I can speak personally, I'm particularly interested in terms of finding the new locomotives of growth for our national economy. This one is hugely important. Now, it starts with expanding broadband connectivity, because that's intuitive why that's important, but it goes beyond that. And it goes beyond that to the capacity of small and medium businesses to adopt these technologies, to have the people have access to the people who can help them do that. There's a whole range of issues here that are really, really important to the future economic growth and the well-being of Canadians. So, you know, I think this issue applies, yes, very much, and I agree with you, across governments. It very much applies to the earlier question that was asked about how government interacts with organizations outside of government itself. But this is really, this is something that Canada and Canadians have got to get serious about, more serious than we've been. And I say that because, you know, I think the challenge of growth facing our economy is the biggest economic challenge we have once we get our way through this pandemic. So, you know, this is something that warrants a lot of time and attention, and I think warrants a serious look in terms of government policy as to how to enhance what we're doing in this area.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sabia. Thank you, Mr. Sorbera. We will now move to our last round of questioning, which is 2.5 minutes each. Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to tell Mr. Sabia, I did hear what you said in terms of change of orientation. What did you mean in terms of a change of orientation at the Department of Finance? I'm saying it wasn't a trend, but just a bit of an adjustment. So I've just arrived at the department. But if we are able to share other elements of activities, if we can act in a more transparent manner while still respecting our fundamental activities, being the development of advice to the government. So, for example, the figure that we have just shared today is just an example of a slight improvement in our activities. And given the importance of the work that you are doing in this committee, so if we're able to help you, we are always open to that possibility. But just understand, you've just said that there have been some improvements that have been brought. So yes, I appreciate that. Are you telling us that there were some practices which should have been changed in the past? So we'll say things as they are. A lack of transparency in the department on certain issues. No, not at all. And I didn't say that. So no, Mr. Blanchette-Jonca, I never said that. So what are these improvements? I told you clearly that during my entire career, I respect the origins and the past of all the organizations in which I've worked. And it's the same for the Department of Finance. And the world changes. And so it's quite reasonable to better harmonize the activities of the Department of Finance with changes in the world to adjust certain things.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. We are well over time again. I need to move on to our last questioner, and I will give the time over to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
I'm feeling very charitable today. Mr. Sabia has been on the hot seat for the last hour. I have no further questions. I'm happy to wrap it up and get into private business or our committee business if that suits you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Green. With that, our rounds of questions are completed. I want to thank you, Mr. Sabia and Mr. Marsland, for joining us today for the testimony that you've provided. And I will invite you to leave, and we will go to committee business. Members, I need to advise you that you will have to leave this meeting and log into the in-camera platform. The login information was sent in the same email as the information for this meeting. See you shortly.